meets curl, in which Homer and Marge Simpson form a mixed curling team and improbably find themselves representing the United States at the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. In the episode, the Simpsons are joined by their neighbors Agnes and Seymour Skinner, who are portrayed as seasoned curlers with a long history in the sport. Together, the four of them manage to beat out the heavily favored Swedish team to claim the gold medal, sending the crowd into a frenzy of patriotic fervor. At the time, the idea of an American curling team winning Olympic gold seemed like a far-fetched fantasy, the kind of thing that could only happen in the wacky world of The Simpsons. But fast forward 8 years and suddenly the joke doesn't seem so funny anymore. In a stunning upset, the US men's curling team defeated Sweden in the gold medal match in Pyeongchang, securing the first ever Olympic title for an American team in the sport. The victory was all the more impressive given the team's underdog status going into the tournament, with many experts dismissing their chances of even making it to the podium. Number 8. When hip-hop met classical. It was a mashup that nobody saw coming. Cypress Hill, the legendary hip-hop group known for their gritty lyrics and hard-hitting beats, sharing the stage with the London Symphony Orchestra, one of the most prestigious classical music ensembles in the world. But in the bizarro world of The Simpsons, anything is possible. Even a collaboration that seems to defy the laws of musical physics. The unlikely pairing first appeared in the 1996 episode Homerpalooza, in which Homer becomes a carnival freak and ends up performing at a music festival alongside some of the biggest names in rock and rap. In one memorable scene, Cypress Hill takes the stage with the London Symphony Orchestra and launches into a rendition of Insane in the Brain that's equal parts surreal and hilarious. At the time, the idea of a hip-hop group performing with a symphony orchestra must have seemed like a joke, a bit of absurdist humor that could only exist in the wildest dreams of a Simpsons writer. But fast forward a quarter of a century, and suddenly, the gag doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. In 2024, Cypress Hill announced that they would be performing at the Royal Albert Hall in London with none other than the London Symphony Orchestra, the same ensemble that had appeared alongside them in The Simpsons all those years ago. The news sent shockwaves through the music world, with fans and critics alike marveling at the strange serendipity of it all. Number 7. A Dragon Queen's Reign of Terror. When it comes to epic fantasy franchises, few can match the cultural impact of Game of Thrones. The HBO series captured the imaginations of millions of viewers around the world, with its sprawling narrative, complex characters, and jaw-dropping plot twists. But for fans of The Simpsons, the show's bloody denouement may not have come as such a surprise. In the 2017 episode The Surfsons, The Simpsons took aim at the world of Westeros with a merciless parody that skewered everything from the show's gratuitous violence to its convoluted family trees. But amidst all the jokes and sight gags, there was one moment that would prove to be shockingly prescient. Near the end of the episode, a dragon suddenly appears and begins laying waste to a village, setting buildings ablaze and sending the inhabitants fleeing in terror. It's a scene that's played for laughs, but it also feels strangely familiar, especially in light of what would happen in the final season of Game of Thrones. In the penultimate episode of the series, Daenerys Targaryen, the show's ostensible hero, suddenly snaps and unleashes her dragon on the city of King's Landing, incinerating thousands of innocent civilians in a shocking display of brutality. The scene was met with a mixture of horror and disbelief from fans, many of whom felt that the show had betrayed its own characters and themes in service of a cheap shock value. Number 6. A fishy coincidence. When it comes to the intersection of pop culture and politics, there are few moments more surreal than the sight of a world leader chowing down on a fish caught in the radioactive waters near a nuclear power plant. But believe it or not, that's exactly what happened in Japan in 2023, more than 3 decades after The Simpsons first joked about the very same scenario. The episode in question, 2 cars in every garage and 3 eyes on every fish, first aired in 1990 and centered around the discovery of a 3-eyed fish in the waters near the Springfield nuclear power plant. The fish, which Bart Simpson dubs Blinky, becomes a major embarrassment for the plant's owner, Montgomery Burns, who is running for governor at the time. In a memorable scene, Burns attempts to prove that the fish is safe to eat by taking a bite out of it during a televised dinner at the Simpson home. But the stunt backfires spectacularly when Burns spits out the fish in disgust. sending his poll numbers plummeting and ultimately costing him the election. Fast forward more than 30 years, and life suddenly began to imitate art in the most bizarre way possible. In the wake of the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster, which saw a massive earthquake and tsunami that caused a meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, the Japanese government began a program to release treated radioactive water from the plant into the ocean. The move was met with widespread criticism and concern from environmental groups and neighboring countries, who feared that the water could harm marine life and contaminate the food chain. But in a shocking display of confidence, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida decided to prove that the water was safe by taking a bite out of a fish caught near the plant himself. The moment was captured on camera and quickly went viral, with many commentators noting the eerie parallels to the Simpsons episode from so many years before. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. The shooting incident at a rally in Pennsylvania involving former U.S. President Donald Trump has sparked global attention, with some claiming it's another example of the Simpsons' insane Donald Trump predictions that came true. A viral image suggests the show predicted Trump being shot in a year. However, it was later revealed this image might be a hoax, likely created with Photoshop. What do you think? A real prediction or a clever fake? Let us know in the comments. Number 5. Nobel Prize. Predicting the winner of the Nobel Prize is about as difficult as forecasting the weather a year in advance, but somehow, in a blink and you'll miss it moment from a 2010 episode of The Simpsons, the show managed to do just that. The episode, titled Elementary School Musical, centers around a Nobel Prize betting pool organized by none other than Milhouse Van Houten. In a throwaway gag, Milhouse is shown to have correctly picked Bengt-R Holmstrom as the winner of the prize in economics. Fast forward to 2016, and the real-life Holmstrom, a Finnish economist known for his work on contract theory and incentive design, was indeed awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences, along with Oliver Hart of Harvard University. The odds of predicting a Nobel Prize winner 6 years in advance are astronomically low, but somehow, The Simpsons managed to do it. It's the kind of eerie coincidence that has led some fans to speculate that the show's writers must have a crystal ball hidden away in their offices. Of course, the more likely explanation is that the show's writers are just incredibly well-read and plugged into the world of economics. Holmstrom's work on contract theory was already highly influential in the field by 2010, and it's possible that one of the show's writers was familiar with his research and decided to give him a shout-out in the script. Number 4. The Ebola virus. Ebola virus is one of the most dangerous diseases known to humanity. In a bizarre example of unintentional foresight, a 1997 episode of The Simpsons featured a fictional children's book titled Curious George and the Ebola Virus. This imaginary book predicted a real-life Ebola outbreak nearly 2 decades before it happened. In the episode, titled Lisa's Sax, Bart comes down with a bad case of the flu and is forced to stay home from school. To pass the time, he reads a series of increasingly bizarre children's books, culminating in the aforementioned Curious George title. At the time, the joke must have seemed like a bit of absurdist humor, a nod to the darkest fears of overprotective parents everywhere. But fast forward to 2014, and suddenly, the gag takes on a chilling new significance. That year, an Ebola outbreak ravaged West Africa, infecting more than 28,000 people and taking the lives of over 11,000. The virus even made its way to the United States, with a handful of cases reported in Texas and New York. The parallels between the fictional outbreak in The Simpsons and the real-life one are eerie, to say the least. In both cases, the disease is portrayed as a terrifying and unpredictable threat, one that can strike without warning and leave devastation in its wake. Number 3. Branson takes flight. What seemed like just another Simpsons gag turned out to be an eerie peek into the future of space travel. In an episode filled with art heists and globe-trotting, there's a moment most viewers missed, a small throwaway detail that hinted at what was yet to come. In the caper chase, Homer and Lisa set off to authenticate a suspiciously cheap painting, crossing paths with a quirky art forger named Klaus Ziegler along the way. But it's a brief cutaway gag that would prove to be the most prophetic. As Lisa and Ziegler debate the merits of his forged artwork, we see a quick flash of a familiar face, billionaire entrepreneur Richard Branson, floating in a spacecraft high above the Earth. At the time, it seemed like a silly joke, a nod to Branson's well-known love of all things high-flying and adventurous. But fast forward to 2021, and suddenly, the gag takes on a whole new meaning. In July of that year, Branson made history by becoming the first billionaire to fly to space aboard his own spacecraft, the VSS Unity. Number 2. When Siegfried Met Roy. It's a tale as old as time. A magician and his tiger are locked in a deadly dance. But when The Simpsons took on the story of Siegfried and Roy, they added a twist that would prove to be prophetic in the most tragic way possible. In the episode Springfield, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Legalized Gambling, the dynamic duo of Gunter and Ernst, a thinly veiled parody of Siegfried and Roy, take the stage with their trusty white tiger, Anastasia. But things take a dark turn when Anastasia suddenly turns on her handlers, mauling them in front of a horrified audience. It was a shocking moment, played for laughs in the world of The Simpsons. But fast forward a decade, and the real-life Siegfried and Roy would face a similar fate. In 2003, Roy Horn was attacked by one of his beloved tigers during a live performance, leaving him partially paralyzed and ending the duo's illustrious career. Number 1. The pandemic. When the COVID-19 pandemic first began to sweep across the globe in the early 2020, it felt like something out of a science fiction movie. The idea of a highly contagious virus spreading from person to person, forcing entire cities and countries into lockdown, seemed like the stuff of dystopian nightmares. But for fans of The Simpsons, the scenario may have felt a bit too familiar. That's because back in 1993, the show had aired an episode in which a mysterious virus called the Osaka flu spread through Springfield, causing widespread panic and forcing the town to take drastic measures to contain the outbreak. The similarities between the fictional virus and COVID-19 are eerie, to say the least. In both cases, the virus is portrayed as highly contagious and difficult to control, with symptoms that can range from mild to severe. In both cases, the response to the outbreak is chaotic and often contradictory, with some people taking the threat seriously, while others downplay its severity. But perhaps the most uncanny parallel between the episode and the real-life pandemic is the way in which some characters in the show refuse to take basic precautions to prevent the spread of the virus. In one scene, a group of characters are shown ignoring social distancing guidelines and gathering in large groups, while others refuse to wear masks or take other steps to protect themselves and others. That's pretty much exactly what happened in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, as some people ignored public health advice and continued to go about their lives as normal, even as the virus spread like wildfire. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.